All right, aloha and welcome to our show here. It is Thursday, November 12th, 2015. Sure happy it's Thursday, sure happy it's Thursday, sure happy it's Thursday. Welcome to the wonderful world of professional radio broadcasting. We have got so much to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645, and Tom is in our control room running around like crazy trying to get everything back up and running, which is kind of hard to do when you're dealing with antiquated equipment like we're using over here. This is not exactly the modern cutting-edge technology for radio support. All right, getting into the news here right now. Over in Syria, the Syrian army has now conquered Marj al-Sultan Air Base. This is the second air base they've taken back from the hired terrorists in 3 days. They're making huge progress all across Syria. And this is going to be over very, very soon. If the U.S. can't figure out some way to justify going back in and going up against Russia, Syria is going to be back in the hands of the Syrian people. Now, something that's very alarming, yesterday we were talking about how the House of Representatives was getting ready to pass a war authorization to go to war against ISIS in Syria. That has actually been thrown out now. Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid has taken the position the president has all the power he needs to unilaterally launch and carry out wars without any congressional involvement. Also the position of the White House. They're flat out wrong. Under the Constitution, only Congress can declare war. That provision is in there specifically to prevent a sitting president from starting a war on his or her own. Now, canceling this congressional vote is being done to protect the members of Congress who are seeking re-election next year. Because America is angry with wars. They don't want any more wars. And a list of who voted for yet another war is going to be seen as a threat to the incumbents. Now, Obama isn't running for re-election next year, so he's just going to take all the blame for a new war onto himself by assuming the role of the dictator, which is exactly what he is. The president has authority to deploy military forces under the War Power Acts in certain limited situations and limited timescales. War authorizations must come from the Congress. And Harry Reid is flat out wrong. He's just out there trying to protect members of Congress next year who are going to campaign for their election and say, I know the war was wrong, but hey, they didn't ask me. If Congress was really opposed to all these wars, they could start articles of impeachment on this one issue alone, the president exceeding his constitutional authority. Now, Lindsey Graham is out there frothing at the mouth and drooling and saying that, I would shoot Putin's planes down in Syria, anywhere we're going to find them, in order to protect U.S.-backed forces in the region, meaning ISIS, Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, the hired terrorists. The United States is now openly admitting they are a state sponsor of terrorism, and they're willing to go to war directly with Russia to protect the terrorists they've hired to overthrow Syria. That's what Lindsey Graham is saying. So, Lindsey, here's your flight suit. Have fun. Don't forget your parachute. But we're going to sit this one out because it is the United States, not Russia, that is the aggressor nation. It is the United States, not Russia, that is in Syria without the permission of the Syrian government. It is the United States, not Russia, that is in violation of international law and the United Nations Charter. The United States government is clearly in the wrong, and we, the people, know it. And you do not have our support for yet another war of aggression to make the money junkies richer than they already are. Now, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is out there laying out Washington's policy in Syria. This is quoted in Sputnik News, and he's out there talking about, we can solve the situation in Syria as long as we have the cooperation of the other partners on the ground. This is the White House trying to pretend desperately it is still in control of events in Syria, and they're not. They're flat out not. Russia and Syria are in control of Syria right now, and Russia is there at Syria's invitation. Now, U.S. Senator Tim Kaine is out there acknowledging that, Obama's big mistake was calling for Bashar al-Assad's resignation. But that's been the agenda all along. Regime change. Get Assad out, put in somebody who's going to run Syria for the benefit of American corporations and geopolitical interests. And everybody understands that's what the U.S. has been doing to the entire world since the end of World War II. The U.S. has tried to bring about regime change in some 50 countries, including countries that are supposed to be our friends like France. They got caught doing that in France in the early 1970s, probably one of the reasons why the government of France invoked the Bretton Woods and said, we're going to give you back your ink and paper, give us our gold, which led to Nixon shutting down gold convertibility. The U.S. has succeeded roughly 50% of the times they've gone into a country to overthrow the government. But they got away with it because nobody knew that was what was really going on. Oh, it's a genuine democratic revolution in the country. Really? This is just the people standing up to kick out a tyrannical government. And we find out it was all fakes and fraud and non-governmental organizations acting as fronts for intelligence agencies. And so this method, this tactic, simply is not going to work any longer because the people of the United States understand this is what the U.S. government's been doing. And the people of all these targeted countries understand when there is upset and turmoil in their country, it is being brought in from outside to regime change the country and bring it under Western control for the benefit of Western economies and bankers and money junkies and so forth. Now, Kurdish forces have claimed to cut off the ISIS supply line near Sinjar in Iraq, which is a good thing, unless you happen to be the president of Turkey, who is ignoring the supposed threat of ISIS. Remember, they're finding Turkish weapons in ISIS headquarters in Iraq. So Erdogan is basically trying to kick up a civil war with the Kurds. It's a three-way front. There is no clear us versus them. The Kurds are supposed to be U.S. allies against ISIS in Syria and Iraq, but so is Turkey. But Turkey is going to war against the Kurds, and could basically break the whole coalition by doing so. Now, there's a banner headline all over the place. ISIS releases new video threatening attacks on Russia very soon and warning blood will spill like an ocean. The video, of course, came from Site Intelligence Group, which, as you know, is run by Rita Katz, whose father was executed as an Israeli spy. And everything coming out of Site Intelligence is propaganda designed to demonize the Muslims, convince you ISIS is the enemy, even though we now know, and Hillary Clinton's spokeswoman admits, the U.S. has been funding and arming ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and al-Nusra. It's just more propaganda. And you know something? It's biting itself. There's no continuity in any of this, and that's why most people are looking at it and saying, it doesn't make sense. It can't be real. More about this when we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before I get back to my talking points, I got to respond to something that's on Fox News right now, where the White House spokeslug is bashing Donald Trump over his immigration issue, claiming that the deportation proposal is inhumane. That's the word the White House spokeslug is using. This coming from a government that has been murdering thousands of innocent civilians with drone strikes for the last several years. But, oh, it would be inhumane to send the illegal immigrants back across the border. See what I mean about the propaganda not lining up, not being consistent? It's fragmenting, and that's why the government's credibility is heading into the Al-Qaeda. Alrighty, we're getting a report right now that the Syrian forces have recaptured yet another Aleppo region, Tel Al-Is. It's going to be over in just another few days. Once they've got all of Aleppo back, that's it, except the shouting. All we're going to see are dust trails as the remnants of the hired terrorists head for the border. Now, we were talking about this video that came out of Rita Katz, Site Intelligence Group. It's another piece of propaganda warning Russia that there will be bloody terror attacks in Russia if they dare stay in Syria. The reality is that over the last 5 years, terrorist activity in Russia has been clamped down on. 90% reduction in terrorist activity over the last 5 years. They've been paying really close attention. Probably one of the reasons for that is Russia has kicked out these non-governmental organizations like USAID, which have been exposed as fronts for intelligence groups trying to destabilize governments. And they're starting to roll up the CIA's assets in Russia. They just convicted former policeman Yevgeny Kristov for spying for the Central Intelligence Agencies, getting 13 years in prison. And basically, Kristov pled guilty and said, yeah, he'd been passing state secrets to the CIA for years. So they're rolling up the ground assets. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Try now.
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, in East Aleppo, that tall ice that they captured, that overlooks the village Al Ice. And there's also, it overlooks like Icarta base and the M5 highway. So these guys are on the run. They're all fragmented now. It's pretty much over. I mean, there's going to be pockets of stuff, but there's just no way even the U.S. can drop weapons in that. All these guys are just disorganized.
There's nobody there to pick them up. I mean, massive desertions in the so-called Free Syria Army, 90% of whom weren't even Syrian to begin with. They're not getting their paychecks. It's definitely they've lost the initiative here, and the U.S. is trying to figure out some way they can go back in and gain both the military and propaganda initiative, and they're thrashing around, and they can't find anything that's gaining any traction with the American people.
Hey, Mike, on Chechnya, Putin invested a lot of money there. I mean, it's pretty decent looking in a lot of areas now. I mean, and because if you saw the Chechen leader that's there now, he says that he's willing to send troops to help fight against ISIS over in Syria.
Well, you know, Putin has used the U.S. government's fraud of ISIS against them to tremendous effect. And it's not just Chechnya. I mean, ever since the fall of the Soviet Union, the Russian republics they're a great place to live. If you look at TV shows, I mean, BBC did a segment up in St. Petersburg. And when you're not watching Jeremy and James May and Richard Hammond doing what they're doing and you're looking at the background, it's a gorgeous, clean, well-maintained city. And it stands in sharp contrast to when the Top Gear came over to the U.S. to do a muscle car segment, and everywhere they drove was run down and pavement crap. And they saw so much poverty. I mean, the idea was they bought these 3 muscle cars, they drove them across several states, and then they were going to sell them. And in the end, they said, we're going to give them away. We're going to go to a charity. We're just going to give these cars to families who need them. That's how bad it was. When Top Gear is showing the contrast between the U.S. and Russia like that, you know it's pretty obvious to the entire world.
And, Mike, on those Titan, the Trident II missile tests, and then Russia came out with that drone torpedo. It's not a sub, it's a drone torpedo.
Yes.
People need to realize that they most likely have this item already because that's not a leak that's been intentionally leaked to show that
I agree.
They could not have this. You know, they probably do have this, and it probably can carry a 1 megaton payload to its target. But people it's not a sub, it's a drone torpedo.
It's a robotic, it's a robotic mini sub that is nuclear armed, and I agree this was a deliberate release. The U.S. sent a message to Russia with the Tridents, and Russia sent a message back. And if you remember the Baker test from Operation Crossroads over here in the Pacific Ocean, a nuclear detonation underwater actually causes a lot more damage than an airburst, because of all the debris and radioactive water that's, gone on out there. I mean, they literally wiped out a simulated naval flotilla with a single blast in the Baker test. I have a picture of it here on the wall as a reminder of what we all risk if we fail to stop this war.
I just get mad, Mike. People make fun of, other countries like Russia. They got rusty. Well, I mean, they're flying MiG-21s in Syria with weapons built in Syria, bombs-wise. I mean, yeah, they got rust on and stuff, but they still work, and they're reliable, and they're durable. So people, need to realize if it has a little rust on it, who cares?
You hit an important point here, because Russia builds their weapons to survive in the real world. And that means, they're going to get dirty, they're going to get rusty, they're going to get greasy, they're all rough field capable. They're designed to avoid foreign object damage. American weapons are these wonderfully crafted pieces of jewelry that are going to break the first time they hit a leaf.
All right, thanks, Mike. Yeah, people need to realize just to stop there's a lot of just bashing due to propaganda and stuff, but their SS-18 Satan missiles ain't gonna worry about the rust on them dropping on you.
No, absolutely not. And, you know, what it is, the U.S. government is trying to already convince the American people that we can win a war with Russia, even though top U.S. military experts are saying, no, we're going to lose this one, even if it goes nuclear.
Yeah, they have 15,000 tanks in their area, and you got to get your tanks there, whatever you got in NATO, and most of those countries will say, no thanks, you're on your own. So there's no way you're going to win conventionally.
Well, they're trying to pre-position, but again, the U.S. has invested this immense amount of money rebuilding the weapons that won World War II, and Russia and China are thinking outside the box, and they're coming up with these new exotic missiles that are designed to strike at those power projection points like the carriers. And, you know, I think we're going to see some real surprises. What Putin has in Syria is what's for sale to other countries. What Russia has developed for its own use is more than likely still under wraps, except for the robotic submarine, which I think that was a little leak.
Well, this is a missile war and a drone war. Every era has different, you know, the battleship era is gone, so is the aircraft era. This is a missile war, and missiles will win.
Missile and drone and satellite war. It's going to be a war in space. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, and we'll be right back. Hello, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, James Cardin, the former advisor to the U.S.-Russia Presidential Commission at the State Department, is out there saying from where he sits, it seems to be the deliberate policy of the U.S. government to absolutely destroy the possibility of any peaceful relations between the United States and Russia. They're clearly wanting to bring back the Cold War, if not a hot war. Because they loved the Cold War back in the 1950s and 1960s. All they had to do was shout commies at you, and we would wet ourselves and fling our money and our babies into war after war after war after war. And they miss those good old days of blind obedience to authority, lest the commies get you. The fall of the Soviet Union, we thought, was going to herald a time of peace and prosperity for the entire world. But those who had made their prosperity on the basis of global war, oh no, we've got to get the Cold War back. They're trying to do it deliberately. Russia's taking the other position. They're trying to make peace with everybody. They just signed an agreement with North Korea to prevent dangerous military activity that could be misunderstood, which is a smart thing to do here. All right, let's grab ourselves a phone call. Peter in California. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hey, Michael. I've got two items I'd love to be able to talk about, but the first one is about the Syria thing and the strategic realities of what Syria is, and where I totally agree that we are absolutely responsible for this debacle, and we do not deserve to win. I would also want to point out that
I want to hit what you just said. We don't deserve to win. Remember what I keep saying about Sun Tzu and the art of war? One thing a ruler must have in order to achieve victory is a general population that believes in the moral rightness of the war, so that they will willingly endure the losses and hardships and burden of that war. The U.S. government doesn't have that.
Well, you know, that's right, Michael. And Clausewitz said you have to have the triad of the army, the state, and the people. But on the other hand, if the people don't know what's going on, if they have a poisoned media that they're listening to, it's tough, you know, that's another question entirely. But if I can go on, we don't deserve to win. I agree with you absolutely. But from a strategic point of view, the Russians are severely limited in Syria. All they can bring in is, they can only support so much, tonnage through the air. If it came to a pissing contest, really, with the United States and the Allies, Turkey, they couldn't get seaborne transport through the Bosphorus. It would be a salient that would be easily snipped off. However, of course, that would be World War III.
Little complication there, little, you know, glitch in the plan. There's World War III.
Right. But if I can point out another thing, I listened to couldn't listen live yesterday, but I listened to the replay of it. And I know you always go to great pains to separate Israel and the Zionists from Jews worldwide.
Yes.
And you're right to do so.
Yes.
However, I want to make one thing that they, as a people, Jews are going to have to answer for it. Just like they claim that the Nazi Germans, what did the Germans know about Nazi Germany? You know, and did they know what was going on? And the point is, most of the horrible stuff took place in Poland or Belarus or the Ukraine or whatever, and they didn't see a hell of a lot, and they were under complete censorship and all that. However, with
just like here in America.
Yeah, that's right. But the Israelis and the Jewish community here in America and overseas, they know exactly what's going on in the West Bank and Gaza. They've known what's going on there for 50 years. They've got universal conscription. They participate in the atrocities.
Okay, Peter, okay, because we're getting short on time here. I want to make a comment here. One should never confuse silence with consent, whether it's Jewish people or Muslims or even Americans. And you need to understand that it is a major cornerstone of the Jewish faith that you do not criticize other Jews. That's considered a sin. And that religious constraint keeps a lot of Jewish people silent who otherwise might be standing up like Gilad Atzmon and Steve Amsel and saying what's going on is wrong. So, you know, they're a prisoner of their religious slavery, just like everybody else is. But there is an issue with the Zionim, you know, in all these countries who do feel more loyalty to Israel than the country in which they're in and will willingly cooperate with Israel. Those are people who are acting in a criminal, subversive manner. But I don't want to spread that in a blanket condemnation of all the Jewish people, because there's a lot of Jewish people who are starting to go public saying, you know, this has really gone on long enough. There's a conference going on right now about trying to restart the peace process between Israel and Palestine, and they've got members of the Knesset in there saying, yeah, this has gone on long enough. It's time to look for a permanent ending and drawing some real borders. And even Tony Blair, you know, who's as Israel first as they come, he's out there saying, yeah, the occupation cannot be sustained. It's time for it to come to an end.
Well, but Michael, you know, all the character assassinations and all the anti-Semitic epithets that they throw at people, all the Alan Dershowitzes have been tolerated for years and years. All the ruining of people's careers, all the blacklisting, all that stuff has gone on, and they've known about it. And so if it's a religious thing with them not to criticize, what if the Germans had said, well, then they shouldn't have just criticized what the Nazis did? I mean, it's a specious argument from their point of view. And I would tell you that there's a certain amount of culpability that goes around just for tolerating that and allowing it to happen.
Well, that's not just among Jewish people. It's among political opportunists. And, I got kicked out of Hollywood. And it wasn't just Jewish people. It was anybody who saw spreading the rumors about me as a way to get rid of competition. It was everybody who didn't want to risk being blacklisted themselves. And that crossed all racial lines and all religious lines. You know, look, think back to the Stanley Milgram experiment. 66% of people, perfectly normal, moral people, will inflict pain on total strangers if some authority figure tells them to do it.
Michael, There's one more example.
All right.
There's been several articles about the First Amendment and how the Israeli lobby and their supporters in Congress are willing to sell out the First Amendment in order to stifle criticism of Israel.
Well, John Kasich made that statement in the GOP debate and caught a lot of flack for that. But you're not talking about all the Jewish people. You're talking about the Israel lobby who are paid to be there to push these agenda. And yes, there are a lot of Israel supporters, like as you mentioned, Alan Dershowitz, but they are financially rewarded to take the position they're taking.
Michael.
Okay, well, we're going to agree. Hey, Peter, we're going to agree to disagree on this, and I'm sorry, I'm going to let you go here. All right. The reality is that the Jewish population of America is beginning to distance itself from Israel because they've got very comfortable, successful lives here. They don't want anything to upset it. They don't want to be caught in a backlash caused by Israel's crimes. And they realize the biggest danger to their prosperity and wealth and safety is the fact that Israel keeps trying to claim that Israel speaks for all the world's Jewish people, and basically uses the world's Jewish people as a shield to protect itself from crimes. And yeah, by doing so, the government of Israel is setting up the Jewish people of the entire planet as human shields to protect itself when the backlash comes. I'm sorry, big black line. We're going to talk about Israel's government's behavior, which is criminal, and we're not going to generalize to all the world's Jewish people, because I'm not convinced all of them are a problem, any more than all the Muslims are a problem, or all the Americans are the problem. We're talking about the actions of individual people. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Getting on up to the situation in Ukraine. More than 1,100 tons of food has been delivered to Donetsk from Russia. The United Nations seems to be having a lot of trouble actually getting any aid over there. And I thought they were supposed to be impartial and unbiased. Now, Ukrainian President Poroshenko has just awarded the Medal of Freedom to George Soros for Soros' help in fixing the international authority of Ukraine and a major contribution to reforms, totaling about $110 million. I think George Soros is a perfect example of why nobody should be allowed to acquire too much wealth, because inevitably they start thinking they're God and they start tinkering with the planet. And they cause a tremendous amount of harm in the process. Okay, apparently 37 people have been killed up in Beirut with what are being called suicide bombs. We'll wait to see if that's actually the case or not. The bombs took place just outside a Shia community center. Somebody's trying to kick up a fracas over there as well. That seems to be the Middle East strategy. Chaos, 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 and let them kill each other off, and then we'll just move on in and take over. Now, Saudi jets are continuing their attacks on Yemen, and they are hitting hospitals and clinics. This is the Saudi Arabia acting as a proxy for the United States to teach those gosh darn Yemeni people that you do not kick out your U.S. puppet ruler. They're bombing hospitals and clinics, just like the U.S. did up in Afghanistan. These are war crimes. By any definition of the word, these are war crimes. And it's reached to the point where even Great Britain is saying it's time for Saudi Arabia to be referred to the International Criminal Court. And when you have military forces willingly engaging in war crimes, it's usually a sign that they see that they are in trouble. They're not accomplishing their goals. And they're going to stop playing by the rules in a last desperate campaign of terror to win. Now, speaking of the Israeli government and not the people of Israel, the European Union has just officially refused to recognize Israel's sovereignty over the territories it conquered in the 1967 war, meaning the occupied West Bank, the Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. Remember, just the other day, Netanyahu was trying to get Obama to commit to recognizing Israel's annexation of the Golan Heights, especially because there's a huge amount of oil underneath there, they just found. And nobody has officially recognized Israel's sovereignty over those areas. Israel remains an occupying power. And under international law, little technicality most people don't seem to remember. Under international law, when you are occupying somebody else's territory, you are obliged to enforce their laws in the territory, not your own. It's a violation of international treaty. The United States actually committed that same violation here in Hawaii during that whole let's steal Hawaii from the Hawaiians and make it part of the United States stink a while back. So, overall, Israel's lock on governments around the world seems to be slipping, and they're hitting the panic button. They're being encouraged to more and more extreme actions, and there's a video about showing Israeli officers disguised as Arabs entering a West Bank hospital, trying to capture somebody that they think may have been involved in the stabbing, and in the process killing an innocent Palestinian bystander. And you can just see on the video, they just pour on in there with their weapons and they trash the place. And yeah, that's a war crime. Now, Israel is very angry over the European Union authorizing or requiring that products made in the illegal settlements in the occupied territories be labeled as such. And Israel is screaming anti-Semite, Jew hater, Nazis, Hitler, and all the other stuff. And to show their anger, they've now canceled participation in meetings with the European Union, saying that the European Union is discriminating against Israel over the fact that Israel is discriminating against the Palestinians. It's probably a good thing anyway. Talking with Israel is a waste of time. They never keep any of their promises. Now, the other day we were reporting on how 4 Palestinian medical professionals who'd been invited to speak at a conference at Kingston University were denied their visas by the government of Great Britain. At the same time, Great Britain is opening the borders to all these refugees coming in from the Middle East. And everybody's saying, why? What's going on? These aren't people who are coming here to live. They just want to come here for a few days, speak at a conference, and go home. And basically, Britain tipped the hand, saying that in cases that could have a negative effect on foreign policies, visas will be denied. In other words, the British government just admitted they blocked these Palestinian visas to please almighty Israel. All right. Let's see. Article out of Desert Peace. It's time for the United States to recognize the state of Palestine. The United Nations already has. The U.S. is one of few holdouts. Over in Connecticut, their branch of the AFL-CIO has voted to back the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. Down in the Negev Desert in Israel, they've got this town, part of the Bedouin population, the village Al-Arakib, is showing a huge amount of courage. It has been demolished 90 times by Israel, that wants to clear the land off to plant a forest and make a park. And the villagers refuse to go because they have legal documents saying it is their land. And Israel says, we don't care what documents you have. We are Israel. We take what we want. And they keep raising this village, and the villagers come back and build it back up again. Now, as you know, not too long ago, the government of France had been looking into the death of Yasser Arafat. And there were some reports that polonium-210, which is a favorite Israeli assassination weapon, because it is a very slow, painful death, had been found on personal effects of Yasser Arafat. The French said, oh, that's silly, and closed the case. The Palestinians have their own investigation and took the opportunity of the 11th anniversary of Arafat's death to say that, yes, Israel was behind the murder of Yasser Arafat. No big surprise. Now, up in Canada, a little bit of bad news. The jury in the Arthur Topham case has come back, and they found Topham guilty of 1 count of promoting hatred, and not guilty of the rest. But he can still go to jail for this. Now, the Crown has asked for what are called bail restrictions, and sentencing has been stayed until further notice. In other words, they want to put him in jail now. They don't want him out doing radio interviews, but they're not going to have the sentencing hearing until they feel like it. They just want this to go away. It's been a huge embarrassment. They've created another martyr for the truth movement. And I'd like to remind everybody, truth needs no law to support it. Truth is self-evident to all. Truth withstands re-examination. Truth welcomes questions. Throughout history, from Galileo to Topham, only lies and liars resort to the courts to enforce adherence to dogma. And showing that Israel has really hit the gas pedal on trying to silence anybody who does not believe the way they're told to believe. Apparently over in Germany, an 87-year-old German woman has been sent to prison for 10 months merely for doubting the story, the Orthodox story of Auschwitz. Merely for doubting. We're going to take a break for commercials and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And at this point, it's becoming very obvious that Israel understands the world doesn't believe what Israel wants us all to believe. And they're trying to come down as hard as they can on anybody challenging their version of history as hard as they can. And there's a report now, there's a radio show, or there was, called White Lies and Roses, hosted by Kim Stewart and Christian Wright. And they were basically being carried by Salem Broadcasting, Salem Radio Network. It's a supposedly Christian syndicate, but they're very pro-Israel. And they did a show in which they referenced an article that we have at WhatReallyHappened.com called Israel and Palestine, the Maps Tell the Story. And their show was immediately pulled from the network. I'm trading emails with them right now about getting them on my show so you can hear their story. And apparently it came as a complete shock. They've been erased from the radio station network's website. Their entire SoundCloud archive has been deleted. It's clearly a fear reaction when you see something like this happen. And you need to look at what happened to this radio show. And then tell us again how Israel doesn't control the U.S. corporate media. Now, I want to make a point here that needs to be made. People who go around claiming that Michael Jackson or Elvis or even John F. Kennedy is still alive are not arrested and thrown in prison. People who claim to have been abducted by UFOs and had weird sexual experiments done on them do not have their careers ruined. People who claim to have seen Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster are treated as harmless eccentrics. Maybe they're after a little attention. Only in the case of the history of World War II is the slightest questioning of the official story replied to with the full fury of the legal system and the press. And it is this intensity of overreaction that makes it obvious there's some great secret being hidden. Whether it's Arthur Topham or this 87-year-old woman in Germany or these two radio hosts, they've all been made new martyrs to the cause of truth. Every one of them is a testimonial that there is a certain part of the history of World War II that nobody dares allow be questioned. Now, in our age here, we know we were lied to about Saddam's nuclear weapons. We were lied to about Assad's gassing his own Alawite supporters. We know we were lied to about the Lusitania not carrying weapons. We know we were lied to about a Spanish mine in Havana Harbor blowing up the USS Maine. We were lied to about torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. We were lied to about the attack on the USS Liberty. After all those lies, now standing revealed, prudence demands we re-examine everything we have ever been taught in the state-controlled schools, the corporate media, or the entertainment industry. And we have a right to do so under the First Amendment. And clearly, the First Amendment is now under attack by Israel's supporters. They don't want freedom of speech or freedom of thought. You will think what we tell you to think. Say, Hail. All right, we're going to grab some phone calls here. We're going to start with John in Illinois. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon. And another casualty to telling the truth. I guess the University of Illinois is going to cost them $1.3 million for having rescinded that job offer to Stephen Salata. Did you see that headline today?
Yeah, I did. Good for Stephen. You know, and it's about time these universities realized, they start bowing to their Jewish supporters and donors, it could wind up costing them more than they got.
Yeah, and I wonder if those the Jewish people or whoever put the lobby that put pressure on the University of Illinois, I wonder if they're going to cough up the money to pay that bill.
Oh, of course not. Of course not. Of course, they're not going to pay it. Yeah, they're going to find some way to get it from the taxpayers or somebody else. They never pay for their own crimes because they don't see them as crimes.
I guess the job he was going for would have paid $85,000. So the settlement was $600,000, another $275,000 to his lawyers, and then obviously the University of Illinois had to pay their lawyers. Of course, in the agreement, it says this is not an admission of wrongdoing by the University of Illinois.
Yeah, they just felt like giving this guy $870,000.
Exactly. So, but maybe they'll take that money and put up another billboard with it, right?
Oh, that would be a really good thing to do. Yeah, I mean, you know, if we're going to have a Bill of Rights, we have to fight for it. We got really complacent. We thought the U.S. government, because all those politicians will stand up and swear an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, that they actually meant it. They don't. They want it to go away. You know, and so if we're going to have a First Amendment, we have to fight for it.
You remember, you've seen the movie Monty Python's The Meaning of Life?
Oh, yes.
You remember the restaurant scene with the big fat guy after he exploded?
Oh, yes.
And the cleaning woman was cleaning up, remember? And she said, at least I don't work for Jews. And John Cleese chokes on a cigarette.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I did not know I had that access to working here. I apologize. That's what this reminds me of. You know, the only people that are racist are the ones who criticize Israel, you know?
Well, I think there's a little racism coming back the other way. I mean, with all this anti-Semite, Jew-hater kind of screed, that's ultimately, you know, God's chosen people is a racist idea.
Well, you're absolutely correct. And like I said, that's the biggest hindrance to us getting anything as far as patriotism going is all these American Christian churches who have been brainwashed to think that they have an obligation to the people of the Old Testament or something. They've been brainwashed. Yeah,
they don't even realize that the people who live in Israel today are not connected with the people who lived there in the Old Testament. They're transplanted Khazars and, you know, various other people. And Israel has really exploited the Christian end times myth. And we do have a very dangerous number of people running around this country. I think even Sarah Palin is one of them, that are absolutely convinced that if they help Israel set fire to the entire planet Earth, Jesus is going to come down and invite them all up to the big house when it's over.
Yeah, that's right. Now, there's even a young preacher out there, or a missionary. His name is Paul Washer, and he's gone into some of these Southern Baptist churches, and he's told a lot of those people going, you people pass yourself off as born-again Christians. He goes, you still watch television shows, you still use curse words, you still listen to music. I mean, he lambasted a lot of the people because this born-again Christianity stuff started right after World War II, and it came right out of the seminaries after they were Judaized. So that whole born-again Christianity thing is a ruse, but you can see how much damage it's done politically ever since Reagan and the Christian
nothing new with that.
Israel.
Nothing new with that. Religion has been a tremendous force for enslavement and tyranny for as long as it's been organized. And I don't have an issue with people's personal religious beliefs, but, you know, these large, formal, organized churches exist to exploit and plunder and control populations. And that's why they're so buddy-buddy with governments.
Well, you can do that. You can sit any of these Christians down and you can lead them right down the road and you go fact, 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 like the ones that you're talking about history.
Yep.
And then saying, now, what about the entangling alliance with Israel? And they'll go, oh, no, we can't go against Israel. Oh, no. See,
well, they're brainwashed.
It's emotional.
That's it. They've been brainwashed. They've been absolutely brainwashed. Okay?
No, and that's it. Religion's always been a tool of the state to control the people, and that's how America was founded. Was the people just got out of the church state. When the church marries the state, your nation is finished.
Absolutely. It's always been the same. And we're...
All right.
Well, we're going to let you go here because we got to take another break for commercials. I know we got another caller waiting on the line. But we're going to let you wait until after the commercials. Now, as I mentioned before, there's this major Israel peace conference going on where members of the Knesset and even Tony Blair are out there saying it's time for a state of Palestine. This is a major seismic shift for Israel's agenda. I'm sure they're not going to be happy about it at all. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And there's been a new development on the story of that Metrojet that crashed in the Sinai. The official investigation is not confirming a cause yet. Of course, the Western media, based on intelligence from Israel, is screaming, oh, it was a terrorist bomb and it's all Putin's fault because he went into Syria and he sacrificed his own people. Frothing at the mouth. Latest word coming on out is apparently British security experts did an inspection of that airport and gave it an all clear just weeks before this flight. So if there was a bomb on that plane, it had to be somebody inside the security system. So, more about that. Let's grab ourselves a phone call here. John in, I have to look at my little cheat sheet. Mississippi. John in Mississippi, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike?
I'm doing good.
I just wanted to talk about, I didn't see all the debate. I only saw a little snippet of it. But when Rand Paul was talking about, I just watched the end of when he says, we funded ISIS. That's the real main problem. If you saw the look on all the general politician candidates, they had this look like, let's switch to another topic.
Oh, yeah, that's something that they don't want the American people to know that, because it reveals the whole war on terror is a gigantic hoax. It's as big a lie to start a war as the Lusitania not carrying weapons or Pearl Harbor was a surprise. This is the big lie that they're trying to use to start World War III, the war on terror. And it's been confirmed time and time again that, yes, the United States government, while they were telling you and I that ISIS and Al-Qaeda were evil terrorists and our enemies in the war on terror, was smuggling arms and supplies and weapons to them from Libya to Syria through the consulate in Benghazi.
Yeah, it was just astonishing to see the look, and then the response that Michael Rivero gave afterwards, and then it was, Russia, bad food and dinosaurs out of his eyes, stuff like that. You know?
Well, remember, as I mentioned before, there are two classes of secrets in politics. There are the little secrets that you use as fodder during campaigns, the affairs, the little corruptions and so forth. Then there are the great secrets, the one that nobody dares talk about because they could bring the entire government down. The truth behind the Kennedy assassination, the truth behind 9/11. And yes, the fact that the U.S. government, even as it cranks up the propaganda to assure us all that ISIS is the enemy, the fact that ISIS is really working for the United States as a proxy tool to redraw the map of the Middle East. That's a secret, especially all those military families who have lost their children in these wars or have had their children permanently disabled in these wars. They have to be furious at this outright deception.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that, and for people to try to find that and just look at their faces. All of them went red. All of them had wide-eyed. It was just astonishing.
Yeah, but we have that video of that senator who's also a Hillary Clinton spokesslug saying and yes, it was a bad policy. And the good news is we've decided we're not going to do that anymore. But it's been confirmed. How many times does it have to be confirmed until you understand? The United States government, at the same time it was telling the American people that ISIS and Al-Qaeda were our mortal enemies in the declared war on terror, was actually funding and supporting them. I mean, it's right out of George Orwell's 1984. Emmanuel Goldstein, the uber villain that is used to scare the population into obedient cooperation. The government has to make the enemies with which to scare us into obedience.
Yeah, yep. And there's one more thing I want to let you know before I go. I think that I just watched something on the news and YouTube. I guess there's something going on in Pakistan and India. They're mobilizing too for a threat. India is mobilizing the threat for Pakistan, and Pakistan talking about getting nuclear bombs too to combat that situation.
Well, Pakistan already has nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I know they already have them, but they're it's just the thought of they're putting them out there. It's so chaotic now, Mike.
Well, the United States has just announced they've got 180 nuclear weapons already in position in Europe, ready to go live at a moment's notice.
Yeah, and then to tell, I know that's like apocalyptic right there. That's
yeah, they're risking the incineration of the surface of planet Earth in this argument over whose brand of ink and paper we're all supposed to use for the next 100 years. You know what I can't understand? I'm not hearing any of these people screaming about global warming, concerned about how hot nuclear weapons are going to make the surface of planet Earth.
Good point.
Okay?
You have a good one, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Well, we're in an age right now where the symbolic gestures are flying. The United States launched that Trident missile up the West Coast at a specific time where everybody would see it to send a message to Russia and China. Russia has sent back a message by leaking the existence of robotic submarines nuclear armed. And now China has sent a message. They've announced they've developed a new stealth material that is far lighter and cheaper than anything anybody else has. They're going to be able to put on everything. Just drinks up microwave radiation, doesn't give anything back at all. So everybody is sending messages saying, don't push this any further. Turning to the economy, heavy equipment dealer Finning has slashed 1,100 jobs, underscoring the impact in the commodity slump. Now, because of this oil price war that's been going on, the shale industry, the frackers, are in serious trouble. There are now 4 U.S. fracking firms with an aggregate $4.8 billion in debt, warning they could default any minute because they can't sell what they're getting out of the ground for what it costs them to get out of the ground. Investment in fracking firms has all but vanished on the stock market. Everybody understands they're in serious, serious trouble. Interesting little story. Gold bullion demand surges 27% in the third quarter. China's on a buying spree, and yet gold prices here in the U.S. continue to be driven downward. It's such a violation of supply and demand. It's obvious it's being rigged. Same thing with silver. Rising silver investment demand puts record squeeze on North American supply. Silver prices are down. It only makes sense if these prices are being artificially kept down to keep people in the stock market and keep money in those negative interest savings accounts. But if you're working for Goldman Sachs, you just hit the jackpot. 425 Goldman Sachs employees have just been anointed managing directors, which carry an average salary of $1 million per year. The money junkies are doing great. You're not. The money junkies are doing absolutely great. So, anyway, we've got to take another break for commercials. We'll be back with more about the economy after these few words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking about the economy. And last week it was reported that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are probably going to need new taxpayer bailouts. So it's with a little bit of interest. We're looking at this article over at David Stockman, ContraCorner.com, where he's talking about the Freddie Mac being an $18 billion spree of crony capitalist thievery. And one of the examples he puts out is how Freddie Mac is being used to provide lower interest loans to big real estate developers. And it is a huge cost in public funds that don't actually provide any public purpose. It's just a favor. And we've been talking a lot about the H-1B visas, and there's an article coming out of Blacklisted News about how outsourcing firms are just, swamping the system with applications for H-1B visas to get people for outsourcing jobs. And apparently they're exploiting a loophole, and it's costing U.S. jobs. And what we're getting from the White House and the corporate media is, the economy's fine. We're in a recovery. Really, there's lots of jobs, as long as you don't mind flipping burgers or, moving stuff around warehouses as a job, which is going to be a bit of a letdown for people who got a college degree and are on the hook for $35,000, $50,000 in student loans. We're all being driven down to the same level of economic squalor, poverty, and debt. Because they need to do that to drop those borders, to bring on the New World Order. Now, over in Greece, the unions have kicked off a general strike, protesting new austerity cuts. And remember, when you choose to live a simpler life voluntarily, that's austerity. When the government makes you live a simpler life so they can take more money from you, that is dictatorship. And already it has turned violent. There are protests all over the streets of Athens, Molotov cocktails, rioting, conflict between the police and the people. They've had it with all this money junkie private central banking because it makes the bankers rich and the people of planet Earth poor. And all it cost those bankers was ink, paper, computer time, and the right bribes to the right politicians to conquer the world and enslave it permanently to death. Over in Great Britain, people there who are fed up with the economic squalor they're being driven into have managed to get 170,000 signatures on a petition calling for a no-confidence vote in Prime Minister David Cameron. Now, Britain has the same deal as the White House petition site. When you get enough votes on a petition, you get enough signatures on a petition, the government has to respond to it. So far here in the United States of America, the response tends to be, we looked at it, no. But apparently there are enough signatures on this petition to call for a debate in Parliament. They will be announcing the day of that debate in the next 7 days. Doesn't mean Cameron's in trouble. Parliament just has to go through the motions of debating it and saying, well, really, it's the fault of ordinary people that they're hungry and homeless and jobless and starving. The economy's fine. We have an acceptable level of unemployment in this country. We've all got jobs. And so do most of our friends. Now, the IMF is now saying they may decide to add the Chinese yuan to its currency basket next month in December. Major blow to dollar hegemony. But even the IMF recognizes the yuan and the ruble are solid currencies issued by governments that are able to redeem those currencies for manufactured goods and agricultural produce. The United States dollar is based on debt, on the promise that future Americans will have money taken away from them and nothing given back for it in order to make good on the U.S. dollar and the Treasury bonds. And there's a bubble. There are not enough living Americans, even with all the flood of illegal immigrants, even if somehow magically there were well-paying jobs for everybody, to ever redeem all those Treasury bonds. So the IMF is starting to pull away and say, this dollar hegemony thing, it isn't working out. Now, surprisingly, relations between Saudi Arabia and Russia are improving. Saudi Arabia's new king is very unhappy with the results of the U.S. attempt to ruin Russia's economy with an oil price war because it has backflashed onto Saudi Arabia and the U.S. fracking industry and Canada and Venezuela. Huge amount of economic devastation. This little gotcha the U.S. government tried against Russia. And Saudi Arabia is starting to make motions about, maybe we'd be better off dealing with Russia. They got a strong economy. They're not out there trying to make war. They're just trying to do business. And maybe it's time for us to do business with them. Now, as you probably already heard, students across the United States are marching on college campuses over student debt, demanding free public college, which, in and of itself, I don't think is a bad idea. This whole student loan was just another scam to take young people and plunge them onto that barbed debt hook hard and early so they can never get off. And I think college education should be free for the taxes that we pay. But of course, the U.S. government says, government is choosing, government is prioritizing. We need to spend the money on Israel. We need to spend the money on war. We need to prop up Wall Street. We don't have anything left over for taking care of the people. I mean, how silly do you think that's going to be? More about that in a bit. We're continuing to see reports that the FBI is expanding their investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server to possible violation of criminal code involving false statements made under oath. I still think this is a smokescreen. And what's going to happen is the FBI is going to claim that their exhaustive, comprehensive investigation has found that Hillary Clinton did absolutely nothing wrong, no need to look any further at all, and Hillary will ride the tidal wave of sympathy and victimhood into the nomination. Now, Michael Schur, former CIA bin Laden unit chief, is out there saying there is no question Hillary Clinton's unencrypted email communications were stolen by all of America's enemies: Russia, China, Israel, Iran, probably even the Islamic State. And once again, I want to hit this point. I'm not going to let this go. Remember Chinagate from 1996? Then President Bill Clinton authorized the sale of sensitive U.S. technology to China, technology with military application, and Chinese money was donated to his re-election campaign using American citizens of Chinese ancestry as the cutouts, the launderers, to make it legal. We have to ask, we deserve to know, if Hillary Rodham was playing that same game, selling U.S. secrets, delivered via a private server with weaker security than Ashley Madison, in exchange for donations to the charitable foundation, which is legally allowed to directly accept money from foreign governments, and 40% of the donations into the charitable foundation have come from foreign sources. This is something that needs to be asked and answered. And the longer the corporate media and the government persist in ignoring this, the more complicit they look. Meanwhile, of course, we have to deal with Obama's double standards on leaks. He's out there absolutely defending Hillary Clinton. I know for a fact she hasn't done anything whatsoever. Meanwhile, they're going after whistleblowers like crazy. The hypocrisy is undermining the credibility of the executive branch. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. And I'm starting to get emails from people all over sending me these stories about how Israel's minions are trying to shut down and silence anybody they don't like about. I'm looking at one where over in Great Britain, there's a Whitechapel art gallery has canceled an exhibition by an artist who was simply labeled Holocaust denier and white supremacist. There were complaints and threats against the gallery, and they yanked his exhibition. So at this point, it is obvious Israel's supporters are launching an all-out attack on anyone who refuses to believe what Israel tells them to believe. Now, this is actually going to be a good thing. Remember that coffee mug we have over at the online store? The fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force it to act like one where everybody can see it. And that's what Israel's minions are doing right now with all of these things. Arthur Topham, that 87-year-old woman in Germany, the radio show being kicked off the air. They're putting on display their fear that one of the biggest frauds in history is starting to unravel. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, on the GOP debate earlier this week, John Kasich actually came out saying that there should be no more criticizing Israel in public. He actually said that. It should not be allowed to criticize Israel. Okay, Governor, do you remember that thing called the First Amendment? Ever hear of it? Or does your obedience to Israel override the Constitution and you just hope we'll all go along with that? Because unlike politicians who will stand up, raise their hand, put their hand on the Bible, and take an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, I plan on actually doing it against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And to hear an American candidate for the presidency up there saying that there shouldn't be First Amendment rights to criticize the government of Israel, that's an insult, not only to every living American today, but every American who was killed or crippled in all these wars in which they were told they were preserving the American way of life. Now, Ben Carson is on record as wanting jail time for health care fraud, except for apparently the people he's friendly with. And the particular case involves a dentist in Pittsburgh, Alfonso Costa, pleaded guilty to a felony count of health care fraud. And Carson helped Costa escape the prison sentence. Costa was able to avoid prison time after Carson intervened with a federal judge and pled leniency. So there's one set of laws and values for you, hoi polloi, and there's a second set of laws for my friends here. Now, Carson's in a lot of trouble right now. He's out there trying to use the how dare you defense regarding claims he's made about his past that are not checking out. Well, now he's got another problem, because as reporters have dug into the claims made in his book, America the Beautiful, published in 2012, they have discovered multiple instances of plagiarism, simply copying whole sections from at least 3 different other sources, including one conservative website and 2 books by other authors, without attribution. The publisher of Ben Carson's book is saying this is serious enough where they may pull the book off the book stands. And the irony here is that in his book, Carson admits he was guilty of plagiarizing other people's work when he was in college, and apparently didn't learn anything from that. Amazing. All right, corporate media is having a really serious problem. Over at the Washington Examiner, they're talking about media graveyard. Daily newspapers down nearly 80%, and they're out there screaming, hard news is in danger. And apparently the corporate media is putting out this idea that we can't let the editorial staffs go. Because without editorial employees filtering the news, the credibility of the media will be undermined. And they've actually got it completely backwards. It's the filtering of the news by the editorial staff that has destroyed corporate media's credibility. Now, over at the Brookings Institute, they have a study, 7 trends in old and new media. And they're talking about the need for effective public management. And they don't understand why the corporate media is in decline and the new media, the independent media, is on the ascendancy. Well, the answer is simple, but one that the Brookings Institution can't actually admit to. Their traditional media has been exposed as professional liars, selling to the public what their corporate masters and government want sold. The new independent media, for the most part, are not constrained by corporate interests or government dictates. Nobody's paying us for our opinions, not even Exxon, we're being constantly accused of. Now, people want to know that they're getting the truth, and they're going to go where they think they're going to find it. And glitzy newsroom sets and bodacious babe news readers in slightly skimping clothing are not going to lure them back. And hiring back Brian Williams at $8 million a year after he was caught lying isn't going to help either. It shows the corporate media incentivizes the best liars. Now, getting on to the immigration crisis, David Cameron is ready to hand over $500 million in foreign aid to try and stop migrants reaching Europe. Maybe Cameron would save a lot more money by putting pressure on the United States of America to stop bombing all these countries that are driving the residents to leave. But no, we'll just take more money from the taxpayers and we'll try and paper over the problem with that way. Over in Germany, Finance Minister Wolfgang Schäuble has warned that the flow of refugees into Germany and Europe could turn into an avalanche. And even Merkel's allies are saying they're looking at 10 million refugees by the year 2020 at current projections. Sweden has already started to impose border controls. The police are now stopping the trains at the border for identity checks. You don't have a proper ID, you are being kicked off the train on the other side of the border. Meanwhile, the European Union is trying to put pressure on Macedonia to accept 20,000 refugees. Macedonia is saying, I don't think so. And the European Union is clearly starting to fragment from this. That's not what the New World Order wanted. They thought they were going to just pile all these millions of Middle Easterners into Europe and stir it up with a big wooden spoon to create this mass of people who've forgotten who they are, no sense of identity, to make them pliant, obedient workers. And it's blowing up in their face. Rise of intense nationalism, hostility. Now, the EU is asking Africa to take back some of their migrants. Africa is saying, no, we're not going to. They've done a huge mess, except for one country. Russia's got the solution. Since Russia went into Syria and started winning against the U.S.-supported terrorist groups, over 1 million Syrians have turned around and gone back to their homes in Syria, assured that they're going to have safe, peaceful, and prosperous lives. They don't want to leave their home country. They want to be where they grew up, where their friends are. The familiarity. And that's the solution. We've got to make these countries safe for the refugees to go back to. And they'll go back. Russia just proved it. But as long as the U.S. money junkies are in there trying to bomb countries, to replace the government, to plunder them at will, we're going to see this refugee problem. And it is the fault of the United States of America. Apparently over in Texas, Tarrant County, they caught an illegal immigrant voting, apparently multiple times. Her lawyer is saying, well, she was just confused because this illegal immigrant applied for assistance under the Women, Infants, and Children program, and they handed her a voter registration card and told her to fill it out. Why is an illegal immigrant being handed a voter registration card in the first place? We got to take a break for our top of the hour news and commercials. We've got a caller waiting on the line. I'm sorry I didn't see you until now. I'll take your phone call as soon as we're back from these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. We have a very patient caller waiting. I'm going to take your call in just a second, but I got a report on this one. Ben Carson's literary agent has now leapt to his defense over this plagiarism scandal involving his 2012 book, America the Beautiful. And the excuse is that it was purely unintentional. We know for certain that Dr. or Mrs. Carson had no intent to plagiarize. That was not what they were trying to do, which is kind of ironic because in that very book, Carson admits to plagiarism while he was in college. So that's the excuse. He didn't mean to, Mommy. This is just getting ridiculous here. And the GOP still is trying to push him ahead of Donald Trump. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. Anthony in California. Anthony, thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind?
Yes, Mike. Hi. I just wanted to talk to you about Goldman Sachs.
Yes.
And I heard it was either Dr. Paul Craig Roberts or Larry Nichols on Alex Jones talking about this Russian oligarch that's connected to Goldman Sachs.
Yes.
That's funding the Russian military. I wanted to get your thoughts about it.
Well, there's hardly anything surprising. These big money junkie institutions love to create wars because they make huge profit from it. And, that's been the back channels. If you go to that article I wrote, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, it lays it out. Where, these money junkies will go out and stir up trouble because then they can make money by loaning money to both sides to buy weapons and then loaning money to both sides to clean up after the war. So
in other words, they're building up Russia right now, these Russian oligarchs that are connected to Goldman Sachs. Is that right?
Yeah, they want a new world war because they made so much money off the first two. I mean, Germany only finished paying off its World War I debt about 6-7 years ago. And all the nations are still making payments on the debts from World War II. So it's time to do it again. And, Brown Brothers Harriman in New York was funding Adolf Hitler's rise to power. And the Bush family made a huge amount of money off of the Third Reich.
I heard one of your colleagues, your former colleagues on RBM, Deanna, forgot her name, Spingbola or something?
Yeah.
Spingbola? I asked her about that. She said that that's a misnomer. The bankers here just wanted to create that so that they wanted to just go to war with Hitler because of the fact that he built up their economy and that he kicked out these bankers that happen to be Jewish.
No, that actually is true. That is also actually true. When the Weimar Republic was on the edge of collapse and the National Socialists came to power, the first thing they did was they shut down the private central bank that had been imposed on Germany under the Treaty of Versailles at the end of World War I, and they started issuing a state currency based on value that circulated through the German economy without accruing interest to a bank. And because they were freed from a private central bank, they became this economic powerhouse. Their economy turned around. It was called the German miracle in the world press. I mean, Time magazine made Adolf Hitler their man of the year. I think in 1937, praising him for this amazing, astounding change he'd brought to Germany. But all the private bankers understood the change to Germany was simply freeing them from the clutches of private central bankers. And so, yes, that was another reason for them to do that. But while they're building up to a new war, they're going to make money off of both sides.
I also wanted to ask you about I know I don't want to take up a lot of time, but you said earlier about China, Clinton, secretly sending military secrets to China. Now, are there oligarchs, rich oligarchs in China connected to Goldman Sachs?
I don't know. I don't know one way or the other. We do know that in the case of the Chinagate scandal, it was eventually revealed that some of the money that was being funneled into Clinton's re-election campaign came from Chinese intelligence agencies.
Oh, I
and
see.
He should have been impeached for it, but even back then, our government was just totally co-opted.
I read somewhere, Mike, that somewhere on the internet that the government here or the banks here are letting Chinese banks open up more of their banks here in America because their currency is strong, and it makes me wonder if, in fact, these banking oligarchs, are funding or are connected to funding the military in China.
Well, there was a surge of Asian banks coming into the United States during the 1990s when everything was really booming and they could make money here. But Chinese banks in the U.S. have not been doing any better than their American counterparts, and so I think the ardor for that has cooled. As for how China funds its military, most of it is ostensibly the same system we have here. They take money away from their people, they give it to the military. Where the banks make their money is not directly funding military, but running credit lines and lending money for development to be replaced by the taxpayers plus interest somewhere down the road.
Okay, Mike.
Okay,
Mike. Yeah, thank you, Mike. I'll call you if I have anything else on my mind. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now then, getting on to political correctness and how out of control it is, and the apparent desire to not only erase our sense of a cultural, national identity, even our gender identity. Over at San Diego State University, they have announced that from now on, there'll no longer be a homecoming king and homecoming queen. From now on, it is simply the royals. They're trying to make you forget who you are or confuse you who you are. You may look like a man, could be a woman. You don't know for sure, really, until we tell you. It's amazing. Now, over in Missouri, around the university, the National Guard is preparing to step in and restore order. Things have gone completely out of control. There's a lot of threats going on, a lot of crazy talk. Now, remember yesterday when I put up that illustration from Twitter about the KKK with their flags and red, white, and black robes and everything standing there, and I said it smelled fishy. It turned out to be a complete fake. Somebody set up a Twitter account to look like an official outlet for the university, and they posted this stuff all over there. It was phony. Complete phony. Now, here's where it gets a little bit scary. This is an article being reported in Mediaite, where the university student vice president is out there saying the First Amendment creates a hostile environment. Even Fox News covered this. So now they're trying to equate the First Amendment with being politically incorrect. Now, her First Amendment rights allow her to speak such idiocy, but she thinks nobody else should have a First Amendment right. It might offend somebody. Listen, go back and read that Bill of Rights. There's no right in there that says you have a right to never be offended or upset by anything that you heard. It's just not in there. If you're going to have free speech, there's going to be somebody out there who doesn't like it, like Israel. And that is the price you pay for having freedom of speech. But to go around denouncing the First Amendment as creating a hostile environment because my feelings have been hurt. Well, it doesn't get more un-American than that. Another allegation coming on out that the college students who claimed to be hit by the university president's car actually faked it. It was another hoax. There's a fraud fest going on over there. The KKK thing turned out to be a hoax. The swastika drawn in poo turned out to be a hoax. And it gets even better than that after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're talking about this utter insanity that is emerging from our college campuses, ostensibly around the issue of racism. And it's being fanned up. And I'm smelling a real big COINTELPRO rat. Because we have seen before how the U.S. government has tried to intentionally fan up racial tensions and conflict. They did it with the Andrew Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin case. When that went to trial, the whole week before the verdict came out, the corporate media was saying, oh, if Zimmerman's acquitted, there'll be riots all across America. It's going to be horrible. It's going to be terrible. Zimmerman was acquitted, and there weren't any riots. Because black Americans are just as smart as white Americans, and they can smell a government setup. Then they tried to do it again in Ferguson and all these other cases where the police are brutally murdering black people and saying, you're going to do something about it? Huh? You're going to do something about it? I dare you. I double dog dare you to do something about it. Because if there were major race riots in multiple cities, Obama has an excuse to declare a national emergency and martial law. And then our student vice president over at Missouri University won't have to worry about the First Amendment creating a hostile environment. Now, one of the groups that is behind all of this stuff is called the African Black Coalition, spelled with a K, to be cool. They have two goals that they openly state are their objective. And this group is on several college campuses already. Their stated goals are to overthrow the Constitution and stop white people. This feels manufactured to increase racial tension. Remember back in the 1960s, during the era of the original COINTELPRO, the Black Panther coloring book? This was a coloring book. It wasn't even really suitable for coloring. It was just some sketches. But it was distributed all over the place, and it showed black people killing white people, especially police officers. And it enraged the white population against the blacks, so they stopped listening to their legitimate grievances. In particular, the bias in the Vietnam draft that put mostly black people on those front lines to catch the bullets. And then in the 1970s, when the COINTELPRO scandal exploded and it was leaked out, it turned out it was the FBI that put out that coloring book specifically to turn whites and blacks against each other so that we could not unite against the real cause of all of our misery. And they're doing it again. Please do not be stupid enough to fall for it. All right, there's a call I'm going to take here. Ron in Missouri. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I live in Missouri, and I live close to Columbia, where all this stuff's happening. There may be some legalities involved, but I don't see why this dean just... I'm sure these football players are there on a scholarship. They're there to play football and get an education. I don't see why this dean said, if you don't want to play football for us, like you promised us, or you're getting a scholarship for, pack your bags, go home, bye-bye. Put some other people in uniform and let them play football.
Well, you know, there was a huge TV contract on the line there that was worth right. Somewhere around $1 million. It would have been a good thing for him to do. But it would have been seized on as saying, oh, you know, he's not supporting our black football players, and you know, he was trying to calm the situation down, and he was really left with no option. And I think he did the wrong thing. He should have stayed, and he should have said, this is nonsense. And again, you don't have a right not to be offended. If you're going to have freedom of speech, you have to tolerate people who are going to say things you don't like. Netanyahu, please take note.
I'm just saying that would have solved the whole problem right there.
Well, you see, unfortunately, the politically correct movement is trying to convince us all that we are only allowed to have freedom of speech as long as nobody anywhere on planet Earth is offended by what we say. If I say something and this little girl over in Bangladesh is upset by it, I'm not supposed to say it. And that is complete nonsense. When you're going to be out there having freedom of speech and talking, there's going to be somebody who doesn't like it, whether it's the corporation selling us bad products, government that has gone corrupt and is ignoring the Bill of Rights, governments that are committing war crimes. They're not going to like what you're saying when you exercise your freedom of speech. And we're seeing this crackdown, trying to convince us not only that we should not believe in freedom of speech in certain contexts, but that freedom of speech as a whole is bad because it creates a hostile environment. That's how ludicrous this has come.
I just think this whole thing's going to snowball.
I think I would prefer it fizzle the way the Trayvon Martin thing and the Ferguson did. They're trying really hard to get race rights going. And I hope that ordinary people who are not on a clandestine government paycheck are going to realize this is just another COINTELPRO trick by the government to turn us against each other, so we cannot stand up to them.
Well, I kind of believe that people in authority, like the dean, if it does not use all of his options on the table to defuse the situation, that's wrong on his part. And anybody else, they may do it down the road. That's my personal view.
Well, it's a difficult situation, and I don't think there was an easy out or a clear and obvious out. The good news is that assistant professor of journalism who went on out there and attacked a journalist and literally threatened mob violence against him has stepped down from her position. But this literally is an attack on First Amendment rights of the press and of the people. That's a consistent theme through all of this. Anyway, listen, Ron, got to let you go. Running out of time here. And I want to get to this article, The Coming Campus Revolution, out of the Washington Examiner, and saying that this is a revolution not based on actual oppression, but a revolution stemming from perceived oppression and a desire to attain victimhood status. And they're absolutely right. Now, when I was a kid, back during the last Great Ice Age, people wanted to be heroes. They wanted to accomplish things. They wanted to excel. But today, driven by daytime TV and Israel's own example, people see greater incentive to play the victim, to whine and stay as they are, hoping for sympathy expressed as political or monetary advantage. Now, constantly those who play the politics of victimhood insist it's no shame to be a victim, and indeed have crafted a media image that is somehow noble to be a victim. This is not unlike the medieval priests who told the serfs that suffering at the hands of the nobility was the pathway to heaven after death. More on this topic after these words from our sponsors. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about the politics of victimhood, where opportunists will go to a targeted population who are perfectly happy, got good lives, they're doing what they want to do, they're having fun, and they'll start screaming, "Don't you understand? You're oppressed. You're victims. And you should be angry, and you should do what I tell you to do as a result of it." And it's an old scam. The feminists were using it back in the 1990s, trying to revive it again today, and we're seeing it at work at the University of Missouri and all these college campuses, where these activists, agent provocateurs, are going on out and screaming, "You're victims, take pride in your victimhood and do what we tell you to do. Drive the university president out, burn the stores, riot in the streets to prove that you're not victims." I want to make a point here. Being a victim is not heroic. Wanting to not be a victim, working to not be a victim, is heroic. Being a victim is indeed shameful if one allows oneself to be a victim or even encourages it for political and monetary gain, or just because it makes them feel good about themselves to be a victim. It's not my fault I didn't get the promotion. I'm a victim of the evil male patriarchy system. Victimhood allows you to duck responsibility for your own life choices. That's why it's such a powerful lure. But before you fall into this trap, before you assuage your own self-doubts by saying, "Oh, I'm just a victim, that's all," A nation of people who want to be victims is the dictator's dream. Because a nation of people who want to be victims will not oppose the dictatorship. Because they have been taught to embrace their own slavery as a positive personal trait. Please don't fall for it. Now, over at Vanderbilt, protesters are demanding the firing of a tenured law professor over publication of an op-ed from last January, basically questioning whether the Charlie Hebdo magazine had really crossed a line with its offensive cartoons against not just Muslims, but against Catholics, Christians in general, and more recently against regarding the Russian crash. And so they've seized on that. We want this law professor fired. We will tell you what you will say and what you will do. We are politically correct. And this is what happens when the universities forget to teach students about the Bill of Rights, or when they take the position that the First Amendment creates a hostile environment. We have to treat these university students as if they're in kindergarten and have soft, fluffy walls and furniture with rounded corners so they cannot hurt themselves. So we're seeing this article coming out of the New York Times, no less. Racial discrimination protests ignite at colleges across the U.S. Do you hear that loaded word, ignite? This is being fanned up intentionally. All Obama needs is race riots in several cities, and he can drop what is left of our Constitution into the shredder. Alrighty, Congress job approval rating has dropped to 11%. Jokic has a higher approval rating than the U.S. Congress right now. Now, a little bit of a historical footnote. Pretty much everybody understands that the Warren Commission report on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy was a complete fiction. And there's always been the debate about the shooter on the grassy knoll and the large wound witnesses and doctors reported in the back of Kennedy's head. Yet, the Warren Commission had photographs of the back of Kennedy's head looking perfectly normal and said, see, the witnesses were all wrong. We've got the pictures. Well, evidence has surfaced that the pictures the Warren report included were not from the autopsy itself, but were taken after morticians had reassembled the head in preparation for a funeral. Because when somebody dies violently, the morticians have a whole bag of tricks where they can basically put you back together and make you look like you're pretty decent. And that's where these photos were taken and used. Which is not going to be a shock. We all know it was a lie. This is just a reminder of exactly how the lie was being done. Story coming out of Blacklisted News. Secrecy and willful ignorance at the Department of Justice are laying the groundwork for future torture crimes. Basically, in a nutshell, the Department of Justice has ordered the return of all copies of the Senate's torture report. The Department of Justice has blocked everyone in the executive branch from reading the entire classified version. There was a little excerpt put on and out saying, yeah, we did some bad things. Don't worry about it. But the full report of what the Senate found is being kept under wraps. And that tells us that far worse things than waterboarding were being done, and they're going to continue doing it because we have a government that demonstrably is committing war crimes across the globe. Amnesty International is being chastised for accusing China of torture while blatantly ignoring what's been going on here in the United States of America, especially down at Guantanamo. Another little story here, this one coming out of Virginia. Linwood Lambert, 46, was arrested 2 years ago and died in police custody. Evidence recently surfaced that he was tased 20 times over half an hour by the police. And there's no circumstance that would justify tasing somebody 20 times in 30 minutes. It resulted in a $25 million wrongful death lawsuit against the police, and I hope they win. Now, contrary to the propaganda, tasers are not non-lethal. Cardiologists, we had one on the show, have stated that if that high voltage shock hits your heart at the right moment in the beat cycle, the heart will go into fibrillation, the victim will die. Tasers kill. Another article over at Counterpunch, real police torture and the real militarization of society. And it's talking about some of the recent police abuses where the police have just slammed people onto the ground merely for taking a step away, and pointing out that that model of cooperation, you stand still, you don't move, you don't do anything, is normally associated with boot camp in the military. And yet that is the standard the police are now trying to hold the American people to. You will stand there. You will not move. You will speak when I speak to you. We're going to grab a quick phone call here. Carrie in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. The purpose of the call is just, I almost spit the PBR right through my nose when you said we needed rounded furniture for the college students. That was so funny. Yeah. So funny. And half of your show, you have me on pins and needles here. I'm waiting for the zingers. And that is one very, very, besides the news and the way you present it, the one-liners that you throw out, Michael, it makes it very entertaining, and that's all I had to say, brother. And I thank you very much for the entertainment.
Well, thank you very much. And I do try and put some humor in there because the topics we're talking about can be overwhelming and very daunting. And so at some point we got to turn around and say, let's make fun of it all. Laughter is the best medicine against tyranny. And, that's why I try and do it. And these days, the utter absurdity of some of this stuff, you can't help but make jokes about it. It's just incredibly silly. It would be a laugh fest if so many people weren't being killed and crippled and tortured by all of this stuff. Carrie, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with our last phone call of the day after these few words. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today on this Thursday. And we're going to take one more phone call here from Tim in Wyoming. Tim, aloha. What's on your mind?
Hi. Thanks for taking my call. You're talking about basically the growth of the police state and political correctness, basically stomping us into the ground with their iron-shod shoes. Now the comment I wanted to make is, when you're talking about the police state and political correctness and various other things, the thing that I'm always reminded of is a statement. I don't remember if I read it somewhere or if I just thought it up on my own, but I think it goes along the lines with the peace is the absence of all opposition. If you have no opposition to whatever policies you wish to force on people, then you can do whatever you like to do. I mean, you can basically tell people they have to follow every single thing, or they're in prison, or their heads come off. It's one or the other. I mean,
I would argue that peace is a balancing of necessities among all parties in equal measure, rather than an absence of opposition. If there's an absence of opposition, things get very unstable very, very quickly.
Well, I understand what you mean by that, but when we're looking at the policies of the various totalitarian thinking or acting regimes, if you want to call them that, then we're talking about what they would prefer to have is no opposition. So that's the peace that they're looking for. They're looking for people. They're looking for basically sheep. They don't want any kind of opposition at all. Nothing in thought.
No, I understand where you're coming from, and they may well call it peace. But history has shown that inevitably governments that have no opposition from their own people become very violent and brutal because it's easier and less expensive than trying to persuade.
Well, look at Zimbabwe. I mean, we have Robert Mugabe, who's the dictator for life. He has no opposition because he killed his opposition.
Yes.
And I mean, that's the kind of opposition that I mean, you don't want to oppose, or you'd like to oppose, but you end up dead if you do. So
well, it doesn't sound very peaceful to me, unfortunately.
Well, no, I know it isn't peaceful at all. But
and certainly the founding fathers of this nation understood the way to peace was a balance of force and necessity across the entire nation. That's why the central government was supposed to be hamstrung, crippled, divided into 3 sections, and the American people allowed to keep arms to stand in opposition to the growth of tyranny.
And of course, much smaller than it is today. We have the runaway government that we have today, which is, as I said before, stomping us into the ground with their regulations.
And they've openly declared war on the First Amendment now. That's the next thing. Right. Oh, you can't use the First Amendment. Somebody somewhere will have their feelings hurt. It will be so terrible. All right, well, listen, Tim, I need to let you go because I got to hit a couple of things here before the end of the show, and we're going to go ahead and close the phone lines. And I apologize to the person who was dialing in, but I do have a few more stories to get to. Down in Miami, there was a lockdown of the airport. 70 flights were delayed. 9 were diverted because of this lockdown that shut down 2 concourses for almost 3 hours, was triggered by a TSA worker violating a safety protocol. And they allowed a man through into the terminal who was carrying a carry-on bag, and they said, oh my goodness, he's probably a terrorist. And at one point, paramilitary police boarded an aircraft and forced the passengers to leave the plane at gunpoint with their hands on their head, subject to pat-downs and invasive searches as they were getting off the airplane. The man in question was a dentist, and in his carry-on was dental equipment. And all these people had their Fourth Amendment rights violated in the name of security. Do you know in all of its years of operations, the TSA has never actually caught a real terrorist? They've given a lot of people skin cancer. They've transmitted quite a few sexually transmitted diseases on those rubber gloves. Stolen a lot of goodies from luggage. Traumatized a lot of children. All in the name of national security. Story coming out of Florida. Apparently, a number of homeschool parents in Florida have been ordered by the public school district to register their children in classes within 3 days or face criminal prosecution under state law. They don't want homeschooling. You will give us your children for their proper indoctrination so that they will know that they have to look forward to war, that they will know humans are warming the planet, and they will spend their lives in financial slavery to the money junkies. This is being opposed by the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, saying that this school district is demanding information that parents are not, in fact, required to provide under state law. Now remember, the more kids the public school has, the more money they get. This is all about the cash. Get them on in here. Feed them those Michelle Obama lunches. Get them used to eating factory-produced food for the rest of their lives so they don't complain about it. Now, getting on to human-caused global warming again, the carbon-Nazis are getting really inventive on reasons why we must oppose global warming. They're now claiming that rising CO2 levels will make sharks smaller and less deadly. Wouldn't that be a good thing? It's going to affect how they have to say, we're messing with the sharks now here. I couldn't believe this one over at the BBC. Global warming could undermine investments. They all know the economy's getting ready to implode. They're going to blame global warming for the economic disaster. That's getting really desperate out there. Now, the good news is this upcoming global warming confab in Paris, which is in December. I thought it was this month. It's next month. Right in the middle of all the blizzards. It would be so good. John Kerry is already out there saying that any agreement reached by the Paris conference will not be a legally binding treaty. It'll just be an agreement. Now, this is a little bit of hedging and hemming and hawing, because an agreement between a president and another president is not actually legally binding on we, the American people. Only treaties are under the Constitution, and treaties have to be ratified by Congress. But that ratification, coming in the middle of what is already proving to be a harsh winter, is not going to look good for those incumbents struggling to keep their jobs. So we're not going to force them to vote on global warming. We're not going to make them vote on authorizations for the war. We have to keep their hands clean and lily white and innocent and pure as the driven snow so that they can win re-election here. Another story coming out of the real news. We hear this all the time. Oh, there's nothing to the questioning of global warming. It's all bought and paid for by the energy companies. And they're out there pointing the finger of blame at Exxon, saying Exxon is funding all the climate deniers, trying to equate us with the Holocaust deniers, the climate deniers. They're deniers. You shouldn't even listen to them. And, of course, I challenge anybody, anywhere, to document that I have received any money from any large oil companies for my stated position on the global warming hoax. And remember, the timing. Exxon did not come under this investigation until after it stopped donating to the Clinton Charitable Foundation. Meanwhile, out here in the real world, snow showers for the Cascades. The ski resorts are opening earlier than normal. Snow in Reno. Severe storm pounds western states move east. Snowing in Nebraska. Interesting little story coming out of the BBC. Alarm as patients shun the flu jab. Doctors are expressing alarm at how many people are refusing to get the seasonal flu jab. We're not making money. We're not making money. Quick, somebody start an epidemic of some kind. I've got payments to make on my Porsche. Now, the World Health Organization is going to redefine aging as a disease. And they're going to authorize all kinds of new drugs. If you take this medicine, you will never get old and you will never die. It's the fountain of youth. Trust us. Would we lie to you? Now, there is actually a field of medical endeavor called anti-aging medicine, and I have a friend who works in it. But even they are saying aging is a natural process. You can delay it, but it's not a disease. They're calling it a disease because they see big bucks selling medicine to codgers like me. Good luck on that one. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here. We'll be back tomorrow on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, thank you for calling your local talk radio stations and getting us on the air. Word is getting out. We need to stop this war before the mushrooms are blooming. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.